to the Challenge to Change podcast. My name is Hazel, and this podcast is all about the little changes we can all make that will have a positive effect upon planet Earth. If you're new here, welcome. If you've listened before, welcome back. The Challenge to Change podcast has been brought to you on behalf of ANSA Environmental Services. To find out more about ANSA, please visit ANSA, which is ansa.co.uk. Let's get into the podcast episode. According to Oxfam, UK consumers send 6,461 tonnes of clothing a week to landfill. Now that's a startling statistic. Now fortunately, here in Cheshire East, we actually send less than 5% of waste, that's waste in general, to landfill. But that doesn't mean that textile waste doesn't matter here in Cheshire East, nor does it mean that fast fashion doesn't matter here in Cheshire East either. Of course, reducing waste, tackling climate change is something that matters to everybody on planet Earth, regardless of where you live and what systems you have in place to process waste. And of course, it's not just textile waste that is significant, it's the production of textiles in the first place, alongside, of course, the working conditions of the people who make the textiles, the carbon emissions involved with that production process, the possible environmental pollution that is created during that process. So there could be in some places, some parts of the world, impacts on water systems, impacts on the local environment. But also alongside all of that, it's the distance that new clothes have to travel to get to you. As well, with that fast turnaround from design to creation to on the peg to finally in your wardrobe. And then as well, of course, it's how long you choose to wear those clothes for, or whether you only wear them once and then pass them on, or more scarily, throw them away simply after wearing them once or only a few times. And of course, all of these things impact on planet Earth. And some of the examples there impact very directly on some of the inhabitants of planet Earth. But all of these things impact on all of us collectively. So how can we help? Well, of course, we've talked about textile waste on the Challenge to Change podcast many times before. Most recently in episode 71 of the Challenge to Change podcast, and I will place a link to that episode in the description of this one. So one of the things that we can do to help with fast fashion and those impacts associated with fast fashion is to take part in Second Hand September. And before we dive into that in any more detail, I would just like to note that I actually cannot believe on a personal level that it is September. And in fact, as I'm recording this episode, it's the 12th of September already. So Secondhand September is well underway. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is a campaign that was started by Oxfam, and it's an awareness campaign to encourage people to shop pre-loved. And it does particularly relate to fast fashion and kind of moving away from that fast fashion kind of focus because of all of those negative impacts that we've already described. So it's something that was started by Oxfam, and it runs, of course, throughout the whole of September. And of course, it's not just about September, it's about creating a second-hand habit. And by that, I don't mean that the habit itself is second-hand, but it's about making that change, and about, as we move forward in our everyday life, is changing the way that we purchase clothes. So why not take part in Secondhand September in 2024 and then keep going? And there are lots of options to choose from. Oxfam, of course, is one of these, but we can also look at pre-loved on eBay, Vinted, Etsy. We can look at groups on Facebook. There also is an online shop for Oxfam online, but there are other charity shops where you can also make pre-loved purchases online. So I will mention a few of those online charity shops now. So Bernardo's is one, Sue Ryder is another, and of course you can also look at charity shop purchases on eBay as well. But that's just a few, there will be many more, so just pop online and take a look and see what the options are. And of course, as we already know, alongside purchasing through charity shops online and shopping for pre-loved, we can also visit charity shops in person right across Cheshire East and in fact throughout the UK. And in fact, there are charity shops where you can purchase items that are designer or a high-end, high street label, but you're purchasing them pre-loved. So of course, naturally you make a significant cost saving, but you're getting something that you may perceive is desirable, something that you would want to wear. A point to note, and no doubt most people listening will already be aware of this, but you can make purchases from charity shops for items that are new, so items that have been produced for that charity shop. So that's something to look out for, really, so that, you know, sort of not making that assumption that everything you're buying will be pre-loved, therefore more ethical, in terms of that, the production side of the ethics. So if you're going into a charity shop, or indeed for that matter if you're purchasing from a charity shop online, having that kind of awareness that some of the things that will be on sale will be new and produced specifically for that particular charity shop. So that's something to kind of be aware of in general, but particularly if you're looking to take part in Secondhand September. And of course, as we already know, shopping secondhand, we do tread more gently upon planet Earth, and we are stepping out of that fast fashion cycle and into a more ethical way of shopping. But alongside supporting pre-loved clothes purchases, shoes and accessories, what else can we do to reduce our textile waste, avoid fast fashion and reduce our textile related carbon footprint? Well, we can choose items that will last the distance. So we can avoid things that are high trend and opt for something that is deemed to be stylish or classic. So many people choose to buy vintage items to achieve this. So by doing that, you're kind of stepping out of that kind of so-called kind of fast fashion, high trend pastime or practice. A point to note that if you've never purchased vintage items before, do bear in mind that clothes sizes will not necessarily marry up with modern clothes sizes. So you may want to try on, or if you're purchasing online, you may want to check your measurements first. People also choose vintage clothes because they prefer that particular aesthetic, they prefer that look. So in that sense, you're choosing something that is different than the modern kind of trendy style of clothing. You're choosing something that is vintage, that looks vintage, and it, you know, it sort of ascribes to that aesthetic rather than a modern kind of trendy aesthetic. But vintage might not be for everyone. It may be that you choose an alternative style of clothing, and what I mean by that is an alternative look. So someone who perhaps dresses in clothes that kind of relate to a particular musician that they're into, just a look that is different, if you like, to the so-called norm. So those are two kind of different styles there, but those sort of sensitive styles can also be kind of crossed over, if you like. You could opt for a vintage alternative look or whatever works for you. But whatever style we choose, by rejecting high trend, we also go some way to avoiding the fast fashion trap. Another thing that we can do, alongside choosing clothes that last the distance and rejecting or sometimes avoiding fast fashion, is to consider upcycling our clothes. Maybe our favourite jumper has a hole, so we sew a design over it. Perhaps the printed design on our t-shirt has become faded, so maybe we can reinvigorate that design with fabric paints. Now, of course, not everybody has the time to upcycle, but where it's possible to do so, it's certainly worthwhile. The other thing that we can do is buy something pre-loved and choose to upcycle that. We can tie-dye a dress, we can also hem a skirt up or some trousers, we can sew buttons on. I suppose in general terms here, what I'm describing is a more expansive way of thinking when making choices about the things that we choose to wear. Now, as mentioned before on the Challenge to Change podcast, upcycling and indeed mending clothes might not be for everyone. Certainly some of us, and I include myself in this, don't really have those skills, and maybe we just don't want to learn them. Perhaps we're short on time, or it's just not something that is appealing to us. But we can consider repair cafes or help from other people to achieve this aim. So it doesn't necessarily mean doing it yourself. But if that is an option, then you can certainly look for videos online to inspire you with that process. Another thing that's worth mentioning when we're thinking not only about secondhand September, but trends and wearing clothes in general, is that not everybody likes to wear the same outfit twice, especially if the outfit is being worn for a special occasion. And I think this practice likely comes from interest in celebrity, social media, TV shows, and that kind of thing, where emphasis on image is sort of kind of hyper focused on, really, or it certainly is in some cases. So, if that's something that is important to you as an individual, and that's perfectly okay if it is, how does somebody achieve that but avoid fast fashion? Well, one of the things that's a possibility is choosing clothes that can be accessorized to look different. Now, there are lots of inspirational ideas online that can help you with this, and I certainly don't put myself forward as a fashion expert. But to give a few kind of arbitrary examples, it could be using a scarf as a belt, or just simply it could be selecting a different tie that brings out an accent colour with the shirt that you're planning on wearing, or a different jacket. It could be choosing a particular blouse with trousers and then choosing that same blouse with a skirt, or whatever works for you. So it's a case of mixing up those items of clothes that we have in our wardrobe, but not just for everyday life, but for special occasions as well. So linking into that point is something that I recently found online when I was doing some research for social media posts that I share as part of my job here at Answer Environmental Services. And that is this, that apparently people can purchase items of clothes that they have seen on a particular show. To read the article that I found this information within, just head over to the Just Style website, which is www.just-style.com. You can buy these outfits through social media stores and through stores associated with streaming services. So, say for example, you're watching a show and you particularly like one of the central characters, it is possible to actually buy the clothes or very similar clothes to what those characters are wearing. And it's not something that I have ever considered, and it wasn't really something that I was aware was that easy to do. But it's easy to see how that would kind of feed into fast fashion. It would feed into that kind of desire to impulse buy and to buy things where funds allow frequently. And in fact, not only does it feed into fast fashion, it also feeds into fast expectation, because we are aware, then perhaps, or certainly some people are aware, that they can emulate a particular look very quickly. And they can do that perhaps even without leaving their house. So, as already hinted, not only does that encourage impulse buying, but it also encourages frequent buying. Again, as mentioned, where funds allow. And thinking of that, it would seem really that producers of clothing, producers of accessories, producers of shoes and so on, or textiles to put it another way, it's easy to imagine that actually that would be what those producers would want, because the more that we buy, the more that they produce, and of course, the more money those producers make. So, with this in mind, it seems like stepping away from that practice for some people would almost be an alien concept. It would just be too far away from what they might want to do. And the they, in this case, I'm referring to the people that might want to emulate a particular look, that might see a particular person on a show and want to kind of recreate that look or buy that specific item of clothing. So, if that's something that's interesting or something that is appealing, then opting for secondhand September, opting to shop in different ways may just simply be an alien concept. And of course, like many things in life, it's very much up to the individual. Some people may want to shop in that way and may want to emulate a particular look that they've seen on a TV show, and some people may absolutely detest that idea and want to dress in a way that is very unique to them. It is, to use a common phrase, horses for courses. We are all different. But for those people that do want to shop in that way, of course, it does feed into the fast fashion situation that we have upon planet Earth. And it does, of course, have that detrimental environmental impact. And that's not to say that if you're not purchasing in that way, that doesn't also impact on fast fashion, because you may well still be buying things that are mass produced and produced very, very quickly. We may still be prone to impulse purchases, especially if the item of clothes in question is very inexpensive. So it enables us, or for some of us, to do that. So perhaps then for some people, the idea of taking part in second-hand September and alongside that doing all the things that I've already mentioned would just be too much of a stretch. It would be too much of a leap from the things that we like to do. So perhaps then, before we do any of those things that I've already talked about, maybe we can take it back to grassroots. Perhaps we can start by shopping our wardrobe. Now, that might sound a little bit strange, but if you head over to Hubbub UK's social media page, you will see that they have shared a post on that very practice. And what they basically mean by that is where you essentially map out your wardrobe. So you look at all the items of clothes that you currently have and you basically count them all up. So you count up how many tops you have, you count up how many pairs of trousers you have, and so on. So you actually refamiliarize yourself with the wardrobe and cupboards and drawers and wherever else you'd store your clothes that you already have. So in that process of familiarizing ourselves, we are able to be reminded of things that perhaps we didn't know we had. Now, of course, not everybody's wardrobes and cupboards are full of clothes, but for a lot of people, that may well be the case. And to give myself, to put myself forward as an example, there are certainly items of clothes that I forget that I have got, and actually the house that I live in is pretty small. I don't have a lot of wardrobe space, and yet sometimes when I'm putting new clothes away or I'm looking for a particular thing, I find items of clothes that I simply forgot that I actually owned. So it seems then that perhaps this practice shared by Hubbub UK would be a worthwhile thing to do. It might not necessarily be a case of counting up the clothes to see how much you have, but it certainly might be worthwhile looking at the items in our wardrobe and in our drawers and cupboard spaces to see what we have, to see what we like, to see what things still fit us, if there's been a change there, to see if there's any clothes that we might want to pass on to a charity shop, or even clothes that we might want to sell online. So then not only will we free up space, we will be familiar significantly with the clothes we already own. And tracking back to the previous point that I made about kind of emulating a celebrity or emulating a look, an aesthetic that we've seen on a TV show, it may be difficult to do that by taking part in Secondhand September, but perhaps collectively by shopping our wardrobe, by upcycling, by mending what we have, or also we can borrow clothes from other people, perhaps by collectively doing all of those things and by shopping pre-loved, we can find a way to emulate the look that we want to achieve. That might be vintage, it might be emulating a celebrity, it may be something completely unique to you. Whether you choose to do all of these things that I've mentioned or just one of them, just one small change really does collectively make a big difference. So why not challenge yourself to change today? Take part in Secondhand September and do your best to reduce your impact upon textile waste, textile related carbon emissions, and of course, planet Earth. Thank you so much for listening, and bye for now.